Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Center of Energy Studies at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Welcomes everyone, those in the audience and those who are watching us on live streaming. I am Linda Capuano, Fellow in Energy Technology at the Center for Energy Studies, and today's workshop is an Energy Water Forum discussion on flooding, water reuse, and resource recovery trends and opportunities. I doubt if any one of us has escaped Hurricane Harvey, either through personal experience or following the news reports. The same now appears true for Hurricane Irma. Harvey tested local infrastructure like never before, challenging individuals and communities, water treatment and electric power systems, emergency response and rescue, regulators, politicians, and others. Today we're looking at the challenges of water. Our first panel will talk about Harvey's heavy rain and the resulting flooding of homes, streets, communities, the overflowing bayous, sewers, and septic tanks, the contaminating sewage, spilled fuel, waste site runoff, lawn pesticides, and industrial pollutants, and the strain on wastewater treatment. The second panel will discuss how technology and innovation is progressing to help our infrastructure become more resilient to these extreme weather events. And later this afternoon, there'll be a continued conversation in small groups with technical subject matter experts who'll come together in working groups to have a detailed discussion of specific technologies and innovations that could help in our future resiliency. This morning's sessions will adjourn at 11:30. You're welcome to stay for coffee and further conversation. And I would like to thank Headworks International for their financial support of this conference and compliment them on their commitment to our community and the desire to support discussions and innovation. I'd like to now introduce Michelle Lanou, CEO and co-founder of Headworks, to come forward. Prior to Headworks, Michelle was a practicing international business attorney in Austria. She also served as general counsel for Vedco Gray, which is now GE Oil and Gas, and is a member of the Water Environment Federation, and a founding member of Clean Water America Alliance. Michelle received her bachelor's at Texas A&M and JD from University of Houston. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Linda. Good morning, everyone. Whoa. Yeah. Good morning. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We're fortunate to have so many experts in water willing to come together to find creative solutions to some of our most challenging problems. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the Baker Institute and the City of Houston's Utility Department for co-sponsoring this event with us. I'd also particularly like to thank Dr. Capuano and Dr. Bob Reamer, formerly a professor at Tulane University and part of our advisory board at Headworks, as well as Dr. Samnath Basu, who is our global head of process engineering at Headworks, for spearheading this interesting event and bringing together some of the best minds in the relevant fields into Houston to find ways to improve how we manage our water, one of our most precious resources, and how we can faster implement new solutions as they are discovered. We all know of personal stories after Harvey. My husband, who will be chairing the next group of panelists this morning, and I had 4 feet of water in our house due to the reflood, as we refer to it, since we were hit with the dam waters. Only last Wednesday did the water recede in our house, which is why my husband and I are rather exhausted, and this isn't the best speech I've ever given. Thursday, the water receded enough on the Briar Forest Gessner area for us to get into the house. We and our 2 cats were rescued out on Tuesday by boat, and we have been fortunate enough since then to be living with my 92-year-old father. My father, who can really get things done, actually organized our rescue. He went downstairs from his high-rise, right where the water on Gessner ended, and had them organized by walkie-talkie a boat to get us from our place over to the Buffalo Bayou Bridge, which we and our 2 cats walked across after getting out of the boats, into another waiting boat, which brought us straight to his door. It was pretty cool. We lost everything on our first floor that my husband and I couldn't carry up ourselves. We did find that we're pretty strong. We brought up a 5-foot armoire up the stairs, which later we don't know how we managed. We couldn't save the piano, however, and we were too late to save the lower level of our library, which meant that every author with the letter W in his name and onward was lost and floated away. It's clear to me and those of you in this room that we must improve our understanding of the environmental challenges that we face and how to control them better than we are today. It is hard to remember that in 2010, one of the biggest droughts to hit the state began, lasting into 2014. In fact, 2011 was the worst single-year drought ever to hit this state. And yet here we stand, less than 3 weeks after an unprecedented flood. Harvey has taught us many things. We saw what unimaginable quantities of rain in the wrong place can do to infrastructure, homes, and businesses, and most importantly, people's lives. Our first panelists deserve our deep appreciation for their tireless efforts over the past 3 weeks to limit the damage, help us recover, and get us eventually back to the old normalcy. I strongly suspect that Mr. Dunn and Mr. Lindner have completely forgotten the meaning of well-rested. And I can certainly attest that our good friend, Honorable Jean Wu, has been helping all over this city, volunteering for the night shifts at the George R. Brown, after spending his days tearing out floors and sheetrock all over the city, picking up and delivering much-needed supplies for those in need. Please join me in applauding them for their support and service to our community during this devastating hurricane and its aftermath. One of the things that my family learned out of this was it is very important to have the 3 F's in your life. One is family, the next is friends, the last is flood insurance. We look forward to hearing the thoughts of everyone speaking today. Hedrick's International is a company committed to creating innovative ways to treat both municipal and industrial wastewater so that it can be reused. We look forward to energetic and thought-provoking discussions during the course of this conference. With that, I hand you back to Linda.
Thank you, Michelle. So we'll move on to our first panel, and as I said, the panel will talk about Harvey's heavy rains and resulting flooding of homes and the strain that is put onto our infrastructure and how we responded to the water. Jeff Lindner joined the Harris County Flood Control District in 2004 as the district's first meteorologist and holds a bachelor's degree in meteorology from Texas A&M. His primary role is manager of the district's Flood Watch program, where he implements regular communication with the National Weather Service and the Harris County Office of Emergency Management during times of flooding. He oversees the operation of Harris County Flood Warning System and the Regional Flood Alert Partners Group. And I believe I speak for everyone in the greater Houston area who hung on his every word as he guided us through the flood events of Harvey in near real time, and thank him for his tireless dedication and concern for our safety.
Good morning. So this is my first attempt at a presentation for Harvey after 3 weeks. Obviously, we went through the storm, and that was the first part. Well, the first part was preparing for the storm. The second part was going through the storm, and the third part is, for my job, is data collection. Obviously, Harvey is one of those storms where you're going to want to collect as much data as you possibly can because a lot of people are going to use it for a long period of time. And then the recovery effort that's going on. So, there we go. So this is Harvey, a classic Atlantic tropical system, initially formed just east of the Windward Islands as a tropical storm, fell apart in the Caribbean due to its fast motion and wind shear, moved across the Yucatan, and redeveloped in the Gulf of Mexico as a tropical depression. Unfortunately, we saw rapid intensification in the northwest Gulf of Mexico, all the way to a Category 4, and a Category 4 landfall into Rockport. That's one of the strongest hurricanes to make landfall in the mid-Texas coast since Hurricane Carla in 1961. Now, luckily, Harvey was a little bit smaller than Carla, and so the storm surge on the mid-coast wasn't as bad as Carla. But the wind damage and destruction down in the mid-coast is every much severe as Hurricane Carla 61 or Celia in 1970. Unfortunately, Harvey decided to slow down and then inch its way back east across the upper Texas coast, eventually into Louisiana. And during that slow track, anytime you have a tropical system meandering and slow, the rainfall totals pile up. The last time we saw something like this would be Tropical Storm Alice in 2001. Remember the funky figure 8 track it made across southeast and east Texas. Anytime you see these weird tracks like this, it usually means slow, erratic motion, and that's exactly what we had with Harvey. And of course, we saw the devastation that caused. So this is Saturday evening. I'm going to give you a few slides of what it was like in the Emergency Operations Center that evening. Of course, we had been preparing for Harvey starting that Tuesday before. You know, there's uncertainty. You always hear there's uncertainty in the track, where exactly it's going to go. Well, we can't wait until the day before landfall to start making preparations here. If Harvey would have come more directly at us, we would have had to have a big evacuation from the storm surge area. But we lucked out with that aspect. It went a little bit further down the coast. We did not have a big storm surge. But this is Harvey Saturday evening, about 9 o'clock, and this is where the event began that would result eventually in the catastrophic flooding. So a single feeder band is how this developed. And this is at 9 o'clock. You can see the center is actually way down the coast, just northwest of Victoria. And how many times have we said it's not so much the importance of where the center goes. When you're on the east side of it, or the right side, that's the dirty side. That's where you get all these feeder bands coming up off the Gulf of Mexico. So hurricanes and tropical storms going into our southwest is something we pay very much attention to here on the upper Texas coast for the exact reason of what we saw with Hurricane Harvey. This was my email I sent. This was 12:09 Sunday morning, and things were getting bad very quick. And this is how quickly things happen. Look at these rainfall totals, 9.92 inches in 3 hours. It's an unbelievable amount of rain. 6.6 inches in 1 hour on Clear Creek down at I-45. And this was just the beginning of what would be between 15 and 25 inches of rain along that I-45 corridor from about 610 down to Dickinson over the next 12 hours. It's incredible to see this type of rainfall continue to happen hour after hour after hour. So how does Harvey compare? It's hard to even compare Harvey to another storm that we've had. Obviously, Tropical Storm Alice in 2001 is the closest comparison we have, and then we had the Tax Day event last year. And as you can see, Harvey really blows Tax Day out of the water. There's really no comparison to Tax Day. Interestingly enough, for those periods between 6, 12, and 24 hours, Tropical Storm Allison still had higher rainfall totals. But Harvey exceeded Allison in every other time period. So the 1 hour, the 3 hour, and then of course when you start getting up to those 2 and 4 days. And the 2 and 4 day totals get very important as you look at how Harris County drains. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The other statistic is size and duration. And not only was Harris County affected, but this entire region was affected. And so if you look at 2,000 square miles, and average the rainfall over a 2,000 square mile area for a 5-day period, 120 hours, of all storms in the United States that we have reliable records, so these go back into about the mid-1800s. Harvey, over a 2,000 square mile area over 5 days, produced 43.69 inches of rain average. That is unbelievable. The closest nearest storm to even approach that was in the state of Louisiana in 1940. And its closest was 29.8 inches of rain. So Harvey exceeded that previous record by 47%. That's unbelievable. If you look at the 10,000 square mile area for, again, 5 days, Harvey exceeded the, again, Louisiana storm in 1940 by over 62%. So over 10,000 square miles an average of 34 3/4 of an inch of rainfall. So here are some of the rainfall statistics for just Harris County. We had about 1 trillion gallons of waterfall in 4 days. That would run Niagara Falls for 15 days. It'd fill the Astrodome 3,200 times. On average, across the entire county, we had almost 34 inches of rain. The maximum total of almost 4 feet on Clear Creek at I-45 is 95% of our PMP. And what that means is PMP stands for probable maximum precipitation. As meteorologists, that's what we think the atmosphere can physically produce over a 4-day period. And it's about 48 to 50 inches. We had 95% of that. The only other storm that comes close to that is Tropical Storm Claudette in 1979, when it rained 43 inches in Alvin in 24 hours. And this isn't a rainfall statistic, but it's just unbelievable. The peak flow over the Lake Houston Spillway of 380,000 cubic feet per second is 5.5 times the average flow over Niagara Falls, going through Lake Houston. Remember, Lake Houston is a spillway. Water comes in, water goes out. There's no floodgates on Lake Houston. These are some of the graphs, and we're still working on these, so these are all draft, and they're probably a little bit difficult to see. But everything you see in orange, and this is rainfall, this is a 24-hour rainfall, peak rainfall across Harris County. Everything you see in orange is between a 50 and a 100-year rainfall event. That's the water that fell from the sky. So almost all of Harris County had that 1% return frequency. And what I mean by that is you have a 1% chance in any year of getting that amount of rain. And then obviously if you go over to the southeast part of the county, where you get to the blue areas and the pink and the purple, you're starting to get way out there. 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 year return frequencies. Our period of record is only 150 years at best. And so we're really taking that line and extrapolating it out there to get these return frequencies. So there's not a lot of confidence in that, but that's what we think in a 1-day period the rainfall return frequency was. For the 2-day, 48-hour period, you're pretty much all in the dark blue through the light blue. So that's anywhere from about the 500-year up across the entire county. The entire county. Allison was just one small area over in the northeast part of the county that we saw this type of rainfall. This event was all of Harris County and all the surrounding counties. And for the 4-day, pretty much all of Harris County, it looks like, I call this bubble gum. It all looks like bubble gum. And that's from the 2,000-year up return frequency. And this is, again, rainfall that fell out of the sky. So nearly the entire county suffered rainfall that was greater than a 2,000-year event. And again, we're talking about statistics out there that we don't have a lot of skill at. What did that do? Obviously, when you take that amount of rain and put it on the ground, regardless if it's urban or not, that amount of rain falling on any ground is going to cause problems. Even in rural areas of Waller County, Fort Bend County, Chambers County, Liberty County, the flooding's disastrous. You just physically can't absorb that amount of rain in that period of time. And this shows the depths of flooding, or the estimated depths of inundation we had across Harris County. The darker colors indicate deeper depths. We certainly didn't, I know the scale goes up to 50 feet, we didn't see that, but we certainly saw water in some areas on Cedar Bayou and the lower San Jacinto River that got up 20, 25 feet. It was rooftop level, if not over rooftop level. We've seen that before in the San Jacinto in 1994. We've never seen it before on Cedar Bayou. We also saw some rooftop flooding on Lower Greens, around I-10, Normandy, and also on Hunting, just north of I-10. And for the first time ever that I'm aware of, down around Hobby Airport, we had water go into some second story of apartment complexes. And that was from that sheer volume of rainfall on that Saturday night when it rained 15 inches in 3 hours. The water literally just came up above the ground. It couldn't flow fast enough to the bayous and the creeks. The flooding in that area absolutely didn't have really anything to do with the bayous and creeks. It just rained so hard, so fast, The water just pooled up on the ground and started flowing across the land to the lowest point. Massive, massive flooding. And it's one of the only times where we've ever told people to get to their roofs. Because typically here we're flat. We're flat here, and so typically our flooding's shallow. We're talking knee deep or less. But this was so incredible and so much rain in such a short period of time that water did get chest, neck deep in homes. And the only option was to get people on the roofs. We didn't want people going to their attics. Because first off, first responders don't know you're in your attic. And second, if the water keeps rising, you have to cut your way out of that attic. So that's why we wanted people to get on their roofs. So just as with the rainfall, there's also the return period or return frequency of how high the water gets in the channels. And everything you see here in purple is equal to or greater than the 500-year water level, or the 0.02% annual chance that we hit that level. So everything in purple is way, way high. And most of this is record. Most of these purple areas are the highest we've ever seen. So Cedar Bayou, the San Jacinto, all of Cypress Creek, the entire Cypress Creek watershed, Clear Creek, Buffalo Bayou, a lot of the creeks that feed into Addicks and Barker reservoirs. Tremendous flooding. And we thought the events of Allison on Greens Bayou we would never surpass. And we surpassed levels on Greens Bayou and Harvey by 5 or 6 feet. It's just unbelievable. When you talk about hydrology and exceeding records in hydrology, typically you're talking about a half a foot. You know, the Mississippi River at Cape Girardeau is going to exceed the previous record by about a half a foot. Because that's a lot of water. Every foot you go up is a lot of water, it expands out, right? But to see these records fall with Harvey by feet, 5, 6, 7 feet, is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. So some of the initial facts, roughly 17,000 people were rescued. That number is probably higher. We don't know of all the people that were rescued out there. I know on Sunday morning, between about 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., every available rescue asset that this county and city had was deployed. Every available asset. And it still wasn't enough. And that's when Judge Emmett came out and said, if you have a boat, we need your help. Because the available assets are fully deployed. 32,000 sheltered. There's still people in shelters. Over 200,000 have registered with FEMA, meaning damage, and that's across the region. Estimated damages run anywhere from 81 up to 190 billion, depending on who you listen to. Katrina was 120 billion. Harvey will probably rival Katrina. I don't know when it's all said and done if we'll exceed it, but Harvey is certainly the second costliest natural disaster to ever strike the U.S. 70 fatalities in the U.S., 33 of those direct in Harris County. All of those were flood-related deaths. And we're estimating between 120,000 and 140,000 structures in Harris County were flooded. Comparing that to Tropical Storm Allison, 73,000. So a tremendous number of structures. And we actually think that estimate's probably low. That is the estimate we came up with looking at how high the creeks and bayous got from our gauges. So we could map that water across the land and indicate if that land flooded, we think that structure flooded. But what we cannot figure out without doing a lot of analysis is the amount of homes that flooded away from the watersheds from the rainfall. Like down there in South Houston and Pasadena, Hobby Airport, where you got 15 inches in 3 hours. You're way away from a bayou. The water just came up waist deep in your house. That's the more difficult areas. And we know there is a lot of areas. As a matter of fact, a lot of our flooding here happens outside of the floodplains because we're so flat and we get these intense rainfalls. And that's why we ask everybody to have flood insurance. I do have a few pictures I'm just going to run through. We're still getting all of this in and looking at it. Of course, one of the situations that we have 2 levees in Harris County. We have Inverness Forest and Northgate. Inverness Forest is on Cypress Creek near Hardy Toll Road. That's the Hardy Toll Road you see over here. Let's see if this pointer works. Oops. Uh-oh. There we go. So the Hardy Toll Road's at the bottom. You're looking west. The Inverness Forest levee's there on the left, obviously protecting the neighborhood like it's designed to do. The neighborhood across the creek never flooded before, flooded this time. That is built to modern standards of the 100-year plus. But we exceeded 500-year levels on the creek, so the homes flooded. As you can see, it was very close to overtopping the levee. We got within about 6 inches to a foot. There was damage to this levee. If you look closely, you can see a white area there in the middle of that picture. That is flow going back through the pumps of the levee because Cypress Creek is so high, and it's acting as a waterfall, and it's crashing down on the base of the levee, eroding it away. And so we were very concerned when the people that monitor that found that, saw the erosion, that when you start eroding the base of the levee, all of that pressure of all of that water on the other side could punch through at the bottom, catastrophic failure. And so that's why we worked with that subdivision to have a mandatory evacuation to get people out. This is the West Fork of the San Jacinto River. Again, record flooding. Thousands and thousands of structures flooded. I-45 at Clear Creek, I drew a red line where the creek actually is. By far the worst ever. The previous record on Clear Creek was Claudette 1979. That's that 43 inches in 24 hours. The water levels on Clear Creek exceeded Claudette by 2 to 3 feet. An unbelievable amount of water. This is portions of Cedar Bayou. This is over in the eastern part of the county. And as you can see here, we're very near some of the rooftops on these homes. The pool elevations of Addicks. This is Highway 6. And this is the pool of Addicks Reservoir backing up to the west, flooding the areas that have been built off the government-owned land to the west of the pool. And the same thing on Barker. This is the Cinco Ranch area down in Fort Bend in southwest Harris County. Again, lots of structures flooded. Most of these areas had never flooded before. There are some areas in Addicks that had flooded before. They've never flooded from the pool before, but they flood from the creeks that run into the pool. So on tax day, those creeks got very high, and so a lot of those structures flooded. But never have they flooded from the pool backing up and getting into the homes like we saw this time. And with that, that's all I have. I know that's quick and dirty. There's a lot more to be said about all this, but the data collection is still going on out there, so we're still trying to weed through it.
Okay. Thank you. We'll do Q&A. We'll do Q&A at the end of the speakers. Lauren Statler and Melissa, could I meet you over here after I introduce the Honorable Gene Wu is in his third term in the state representative for the District 137 in the Texas legislature. He has been appointed to serve on the House Appropriations Committee and Human Services Committee, and prior to being elected in 2012, he served as prosecutor in the Harris County District Attorney's Office. The Honorable Gene Wu is currently an attorney in private practice and serves on community advocacy organization boards, and he's earned his bachelor's degree from Texas A&M University and a master's degree from University of Texas at Austin and a JD from the South Texas College of Law in Houston. And I thank you for coming. And
good morning. Thank you so much. It's good to know that we have 3 Aggie speakers in a row. Yeah, you don't have to pause for that. My name is Gene Wu. I'm the state rep for House District 137. I represent just west of the Galleria area, below Westheimer. My district was pretty lucky. We didn't have that much flooding. I tell people the good part is we didn't have that much flooding. We maybe had like 50 houses get some water in it. The bad part, all our water ended up in Meyerland. I also give my apologies to my colleague Sarah Davis, whose district ended up taking all our water when it flowed down. Just a little bit of background. I served on the House Energy Committee for a while, and now I deal with a lot of appropriations and other sorts of things. And I'll be the first one to say here that I am probably the least qualified person to talk about water that's here. But I don't think that's why I'm here. I think I'm here because you guys are having me talk. You want to hear about what is the political perspective, why can't we get anything done on water? Why can't we move forward? What is this process to move forward to get actually something done? So let me just back up a little bit. I represent the state of Texas. So for those of you who are not familiar with our structure of government, and I don't assume anything, the United States is governed by Washington, D.C. There is a Senate, there is a House, and there is a president who signs bills. We have a mirror image structure in the Senate. In Austin, we have a Senate, we have a House, and we have a governor who signs bills. Everything that the feds do, the state government generally cannot do. And generally, everything that the state government takes care of, the feds usually don't overlap as well. Flooding is one of those areas where, or flooding and water issues is just one of those areas where both the federal government and the state government have a hand in it. During my first session in 2013, we passed one of the most important bills that we've passed in probably the last 10 or 20 years, was the creation of the SWIFT funds. And that is, we took about $2 billion out of the rainy day fund, more correctly called the Economic Stabilization Fund, and put it towards water development. And that is essentially creating a pot of money where local jurisdictions can borrow money to do infrastructure projects. And these are especially for rural and smaller areas that normally they would not be able to issue bonds at an acceptable interest rate to do these infrastructure projects. And that was a really pivotal moment for water development in the state. But what people don't understand is that legislation took about 20 years to get together, to figure that out, to finally get the votes for it, it basically took the massive droughts that we had in 2011 and then the fires in 2012 and 13 for this to become reality. And to understand why, you have to think of it this way. So when I look at legislation, and when people come talk to me about legislation, I say, well, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? I said, well, you have to think about it this way. There's essentially, in my mind, a few types of legislation. There is stuff that every legislator is either an expert at or they think they're an expert at, and they have very strong opinions about. For example, the easy example would be like abortion. Every single legislator thinks they know everything about that they need to know about it. Their votes are made up, their minds are made up, they have very strong opinions about it. There's no point in talking to them about it. We know how the votes are going to go. The second type, I would say, are the types of issues that nobody cares about, and there's almost zero field expertise. And I can't even give you an example. There's just like, there's so many possible areas. Something like nuclear power, actually, would be one of them, where most people don't ever think about it, and you ask them, well, what's your opinion on it? And they're like, I don't really know. Why don't you tell me? Water fits into about a third category, that everyone has a very strong opinion about it and care very much about it, but yet almost no one has expertise. They have very strong opinions about what could be done or what should be done. They want water. They want cheap water. They want clean water. But you ask them, well, how do you think we should do that? And they're like, I don't know. I would just make it happen, right? So this last session, I worked on an issue like, this last session, beginning of this year, I worked on an issue like that, CPS, Child Protective Services. Everybody has very strong opinions about the CPS system. Everyone has very strong opinions about how they want the system to run, what they want to see out of it. But you ask them, well, how should we change the laws? And most people goes, you can figure that out, right? So that is why, one of the reasons we worked on that I worked on CPS so much is because I practice CPS. I'm a CPS attorney for part of my practice, and I took it upon myself to go and understand more of the issues. I traveled around the state, talked to stakeholders, figure out what they wanted, how to get them what they wanted. Sometimes something that they wanted, I told them, look, I can't give you that, but can I give you this? And then some people wanted things that were conflicting. I said, well, let's sit down and can we work this out? And so I had to become an area expertise, or an expert on this topic, and then make sure that everyone else in the legislature understood that I was an area expert. And then what happens is when this legislation comes through, I would be the go-to person. If I said something was good, something was good. If I said something was bad, something was bad. And most people said, okay, we trust you, we'll leave you to it. And so just give us something to vote on, and we're going to trust that whatever you're going to give us to vote, if you're telling us to vote for it, that it's not going to hurt us, that it's going to be something good for the state. And water is going to have to be something like that. That certain members of the legislature are going to have to really pick this up, learn everything they can learn about it, and really learn the in and outs, the mechanics of not only how to deal with flooding, but what we were trying to work on before that was how do we do water distribution? And just for everyone who may not understand, and this is so rarely talked about, is water has almost gotten the state involved in wars, right? We have an ongoing battle with Mexico right now over the water in the Rio Grande. I mean, people talk about people crossing the Rio Grande, screw that. We're talking about how do we use the water in the Rio Grande. We have an ongoing battle with Oklahoma over water. I mean, and not just water, but like even we have like this insane feud with Oklahoma right now about when we drain the river so much that new parcels of land pops up, who does it belong to? Right? And these kind of fights that are out there, but you never hear about them. It never makes the news, because just as legislators don't understand this issue, the media does not understand the issue. If the media does not understand, they don't cover it. Because how can you talk about something you don't understand at all? And for most people, it's far too esoteric. It's far too nerdy. So the reason I'm telling you this is because if you're here and you're listening to this, then sort of by default, you are the nerds who are going to know how this stuff works, and you need to start explaining to people, me included, right? So I know there's certain members of the House and the Senate who do more work in water, but those are more rural members than they are urban members. And their concern is not flooding, their concern is how do I get water to my farmers, right? Because that's their big concern. You don't have water, you don't have farming. And if you don't have farming, their communities die. It's as simple as that. So, and if you back up a little bit and you look at this issue of flooding, Houston has flooded since time immemorial. I mean, the city's built on a freaking swamp, right? And we decided not only to build on a swamp, but we decided to pave everything over with concrete. And for most people in here, you say, okay, obviously that's not a smart thing to do. Obviously that's going to be a problem. But to the general population and to most elected officials, they don't say, what's the problem with that? What's the big deal? And even before I got elected, I've been railing against this idea that we keep expanding outwards, and it's going to get me in trouble one of these days. We keep expanding outwards. When I moved in our area in Sharpstown back like 30 years ago, they were building Beltway 8, the western loop of the Beltway 8, and we're like, these people are insane. Who's going to drive out there? much less pay money to be on the road. It was all forest. And now I'm driving down Bellway. I'm like, get the hell off my road, people. I need to go somewhere. But every time we build another loop outwards, every time we expand the number of lanes I-10 has, 45 has, every time we build another Hardy Toll Road to increase speed, people move further out. And it's not just an issue of moving further out. Every time they move further out, they're adding another driveway, they're putting another roof down. That's another a couple acres of land that's now impervious to rain cover. So these are a lot of issues that it's difficult to work around, because a lot of it you're talking about changing the way people live, changing people's lifestyles, changing the comfort level people have in their own homes, and it's a difficult thing to sell politically. And sometimes it takes something like a Harvey for people to now suddenly pay attention. And I don't know if you saw, but Mayor Turner has now proposed a temporary tax increase on Houstonians to pay for this stuff. And if you read some of the Facebook comments, there's some people who's very conservative members who say, like, hell no, we're not going to, no tax increases ever. But I've also seen some very conservative people post, you know what, if I'm going to pay taxes, this is the one thing I'm willing to pay taxes for, is to not flood, right? And that is a big sea change, because these are also the same people who were griping about the rain tax that we have. If you have a certain amount for the size of your property, we tax you a certain amount that goes into the water funds. And people were griping about that. I was like, that's a couple of bucks if you have, a half-acre property. So, anyways, I think this is something of a big political discussion, and if anybody wants to ask me during Q&A about the use of the rainy day funds for recovery and all that stuff, I'm happy to do so, but I think I'm used up all my time. So, thank you.
Thank you. We've heard about the massive amounts of rain on our flat topography that just didn't have time to drain. We're hearing about the fact that we've paved heavily. And now we're going to talk about the part of this is that the drainage creates wastewater, and that we need to preserve our drinking water, and we do have wastewater treatment network that has to deal with all these high volumes of water. And so I'm introducing Shannon Dunn, who's the Assistant Director of Wastewater Operations for the City of Houston Public Works and Engineering. And plant operations protects public health by treating an average of 239 million gallons per day of raw sewage generated by residential, commercial, and industrial customers in Houston area, and monitoring and repairing operating systems and maintaining miles of sewer pipelines that were severely challenged by the Harvey event. And so, thank you, Shannon. Your slide should be loaded.
It's loaded.
Yeah, it's loaded.
Okay. So it's ready to go. Okay. Good morning. Wow, it's been a long day. One of the news, and we'll see some pictures, our crews worked till 1:40 last night, and we're happy to say all the plants are running, Turkey Creek and West District. We like to say, Houston, we have bubbles, so the bugs are moving. That neighborhood is probably taking long showers, and they deserve it. So I'll tell you a little bit about wastewater. The thing about wastewater is we don't like to get known because it's never good. If we're in the news, it's not good. We're always behind the scenes working. People want to take a shower, flush the toilet, and forget about it. So we don't get out and talk that much, but we really do have a great group. In wastewater, there's close to 825 employees, and they are very dedicated. So I just want to run through a couple of slides. We were going to talk about biosolids and a lot of the other stuff, but I think it's important to see the plants a lot. There we go. Yeah. So wastewater has 40 permitted plants. We're permitted for 565 million gallons a day. We have 3 wet weather facilities, 383 lift stations, 622 miles of collection line. That's from Houston to LA and back, buried under the ground, nobody sees. We have 325 miles of force main. We have 127,000 manholes. I love this map, lets people know how big we are. You can fit Miami, Cleveland, Denver, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Boston, Baltimore, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. in our area. It's big. Don't want to go into the maps. I think we've all seen these. When it's coming, we're down at the plants. We've seen these. This just lets people, I mean, you really can't. When you're out in it and seeing it, we all know it's just metros parking their buses. So this is a map of the wastewater facility. Of the 40 plants, everybody has a service area. They're kind of colored. It's very busy, but it takes almost 2 hours to get across our service area. So we have teams stationed throughout. The big area we had was up on a corner here. Let's see if this will work. This was the Turkey Creek in the West District. So this is what was happening at 69th Street. 69th Street takes all of downtown. It's a 400 MGG rated plant. This is 425 million gallons a day. It was a river. You can see these transformers here. It was coming in. It wasn't stacking up in the houses, it was coming here. So we got it out of the houses, which is very important. It came in and it just blew the top out of this facility is large. It has pumps, the size of the buses you've seen. It tore these beams out. So, not supposed to, but we're kind of the first responders to the first responders because people want the water in the restroom, and the teams, the police and fire department need to do their job, and they're ready to save lives, and we want to make sure they're comfortable. So when their time comes, they're out there doing it. So that thing was blowing out, so we're out there putting a pump and trying to bypass it so we stop spilling it. This is Turkey Creek wastewater treatment plant, completely flooded. That's a truck. Our guy was at the plant, and you'll see later, manning the plant, and that water came in so fast. He was driving out of there and got up to the gate. Didn't have time to get the gate open the door, and got out of there. Manned that plant to the last minute. This is some of the equipment we have to get there to the facilities. We have airboats, we have a large infrastructure. We get a lot of support from the mayor, public works director. So we find, you get into this is the plant. This is another truck that got buried. More of the information, just getting there. We got on the airboats to get there so that we can make an assessment to see what's damaged, what we need next, what equipment do we have, how do we get these up running. As soon as it gets right, we get in there. People want their plant back. This is hid back in the neighborhood, nobody knew us. They know us now. So they didn't like the plant, but boy, they sure love it today, I'll tell you that. And I'm gonna tell you, they would come out of their houses and water and give our guy, I mean, just salt of the earth people, really, really something to see. So some of this we're trying to upgrade it. So these tanks are bleach tanks, so we got those up high enough. If we had a little more time, we would have got the rest of the plant up, but this is the West District plant. Really, stuck on this. It's not going again. Maybe the keyboard. Oh, there we go. More of the West District. There's that truck in the gate the fellow had to abandon and get out of there. Just an idea of how much of our facilities. These are large, very large facilities. So we try to get in there and really see what's going on. This was Kingwood Central, which is a very large plant. Same thing. That water was coming in. They grabbed what they could in the back of the truck and they got out of there. They waited to the last minute, and that water came in and it was moving. So some of the pictures of the fences is amazing. See how high the water table came. This is one of our admin buildings, just up to the wall. Just the whole area, the Kingwood area. If you haven't been up there, it's just it's something to see. And I know Jeff knows the flooding that came in there. So this is a couple of the other facilities. Out of our facilities, 10 of them were completely submerged. 4 of them were partially flooded, and we had about another 4 that were damaged. Some of the other facilities, out of 40 plants, we don't, it's hard to get this going. But so we get out there and look around. Our crews are ready to jump on as soon as we can get in the plan. If we didn't stay, if we had the band, and usually we were there. We had a couple guys at Southwest that they didn't want to leave. They got up on the 2nd floor, and they were there for 4 days. I don't know if you've ever eaten an MRR. It is not, it's not good. But most of these plants, 24 to 48 hours later, that's the kind of water we were making. That water, just look at some of it's clean. It's clean. That stuff coming in and flow we had and what we went through. Some of these plants, 24 hours. That's the dedication that our team has. That's the dedication the city of Houston gives to the customers, to the citizens. That's what you expect, and that's what we deliver. Just more of some of the pictures. My friend says you could sit there and have a bottle of wine by that, like a waterfall. It's beautiful. So I'll take some questions later. I didn't go fast, but I was sorry I'm late. We are still a little bit knee deep in it. So thank you.
I really want to comment. For those of us in Houston who are still drinking our water throughout the hurricane, I think we had no understanding of how massive the amount of flooding was in our infrastructure, which is astonishing to me that we were still okay in many areas. Okay, now we enter the Q&A part of this. There are 2 microphones, one in each aisle, and I will open it up to questions. Take the microphone, please. Please identify yourself and your affiliation. It'll just help orient the...
Hi, Jim Tucker, resident. First, appreciate the perspective on the groundwater or the water treatment infrastructure. I think very few of us are aware of that. I'm a geologist, so I'm used to taking the long view of millions of years. People's patience and memory seems to be no more than a quarter of a lifetime. How are we going to maintain the attention it's going to take to anticipate and hopefully plan a little better, given that the elevations aren't going to change and the range of weather is unlikely to be too much different than what we've seen? Thank you.
But anyway, I'll make one comment. This workshop that you're attending, while this front end, the open session in the morning is to bring you the information, we have gathered with the assistance of Headworks, technical experts to meet later in the afternoon to talk about how do you respond and fortify our infrastructure to these kinds of events using technology innovation. So this is a call. We're doing our part in bringing together the conversations to bring people to the problem. We need others to do the same. The legislation we've heard, that's struggling. Austin is struggling with the issues. I think I guess it's a call to arms. We need to have more of these kinds of conversations now that we have this kind of event, and we can understand what the stress factors are on our infrastructure. Do you have care to comment?
Is this on? Okay. I'm trying to think of a nice way to put this. One of the things I think everyone has to keep in mind is while we feel very passionately about this issue here where we were hit by flooding, I'm trying not to just generalize for the entire state, but this may not be other areas' top priority. And the reason is because you go out to West Texas, their issue is drought. You go out to other parts of Texas, their issue is fire. You go out to other areas, this is like we have no infrastructure and we have no schools. So, you know, this last session, agencies across the state took between 5 and 10% cuts to their budgets. And there's a combination of what needs to happen is one, we have to stay on top of it. We have to, one, learn more about this issue and know what to advocate for. Because if you just say, well, we want protection from flood, most elected officials just throw up their hands and goes, oh, okay, I don't know what that means. We'll try. But if you say, like, we want certain things and we want to get towards those goals, those specific goals, that's much more politically viable.
And you know that as we come forward with, let's say, technical options that we think will impact this, you have SWIFT funds, there are funds available. Yeah. You know, Rice University is doing the Baker Institute is doing its part to try to identify near-term solutions that might be available. I'm sure others are doing that, and there are pathways that we're aware of to.
And I think one thing I have to say is everything is politics. Politics affects everything, and you cannot get away from it. If you look at what the mayor's saying, you look at what the Judge Emmett's saying, they're talking about now working on projects that have been proposed for a long time, but why didn't they push them before? Because for most of those projects, they would either have to issue large amount of bonds or raise taxes. And in the past, both of those things might have been political suicide. But now that people are actually caring about it, people are now angry about it, now people are willing to take on those bonds, willing to take on those new taxes, suddenly they're protected and they're willing to go forward with it.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go to the next question here.
Hi, my name is Chris Ellison, and I'm a PhD student here in the history department, and I study history of political economy. So my question is directed at Representative Wu. I'm very grateful to, yeah, I know, I'll try to go soft on you. So I'm very, very grateful for the generous money that's able to pay for me to do a PhD here, and I realize a lot of it comes from the oil and gas sector, who are donors to the university. But I'm new to Texas. Grew up in California, where we had the worst 5-year, most severe drought in U.S. history. I went to grad school in Massachusetts, where we narrowly missed Sandy, and that was a good one. I was living in Minnesota before here, where we had the coldest winter in U.S. history, where Lake Superior froze over for the first time. And so in St. Paul, Sacramento, and Boston, the political economy, it's uncontroversial for people to think that the government needs to do something to mitigate carbon emissions and climate change. But with the political economy of Houston being so tied to oil and gas, what would it take to move the needle on that?
Again, I think the only answer I can give you is it's up to the people. When the people change their minds on issues, then elected officials start to change their minds. Texas politically is more closed off than other parts of the country. It's more conservative. You know, I'm trying not to bash on people, but like if you watch a lot of Fox News, then you think there's no problem, and you're going to tell your elected officials, hey, I don't see what the problem is. You know, climate change is a hoax perpetuated by the Chinese. So,
not by you, though.
What?
not
specifically this Chinese, but although I'm gonna leave that alone. But there's cracks. Even in Texas, there's cracks. I mean, number one is, I think one of the easiest things to do is pressure the oil companies. Put the pressure on the energy companies. Look, Shell has actually been a really good advocate for working on climate change. They're not stupid. They have scientists, they have engineers, they know what's up. They protect all their refineries on the coast. They've done elevation studies on their coastline facilities for decades. They've known this is coming. It's not a new thing to them. But they have to go out and go tell people. They need to stop selling it to the political people they support. At the same time, the general population's got to get more informed about this. If we care about climate change, we care about all these weather events. I bet you, after Harvey, if you did a poll right now in Houston, there would be a significant shift in the number of people who believe that there is climate change. I guarantee you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the next question.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning. Thank you for members of the panel for coming out here to tell us a little bit about what happened during Harvey and after Harvey. Thank you for your service. My name is George Frank, and I'm an engineer by training, but I'm in finance. And I think a key thing here is that we shouldn't get distracted about talking about things which we can't really impact on day-to-day things right now. Critical things which you need to do is typically when you're designing structures, you design them to 500 years. 500 years. What we had was a 800-year event, which cannot be designed in engineering. If you do that, we're basically going to make the design over engineering and make it expensive, and it's never really going to work. It's going to crash. So we need to really focus on little things which have impact, which could actually prevent loads of things. Critical thing I would say, one little thing which you could also look at here, particularly here in Houston, is why do we build our houses out of wood? Why don't we look at things like building with brick? Because critical things like why houses get flooded is because water gets into the wood. Those are things which we can do, change the design code, because basically the builders build with wood and they make a lot of profit because they're building with wood. The water gets into the cracks through the wood, not true, but if you have a brick structure, a concrete structure, the water is not going to get in. Those are things that are practical and realistic, rather than talking about things which are not going to impact for the next 10 or 20 or decades down the line. So that's my little comment.
Thank you for your comments. I'm sure Honorable Wu has made a note, but we're in a water where housing structures are not really unfortunately, the subject of today's conversation. But thank you for your comments. I go over here.
Hi, my name is Jorge Lopez de Cardenas with LDC Energy Consulting. Was delighted to hear all the presentations this morning. My question is mainly to Jeff. Really, with the climate change, how accurate are these 100-year flood plans? And are they really 100 years? And what is the expectations into the future? And the other question is related and probably to the Honorable Dr. Wu. What about the codes for the 100-year plans for the development of new subdivisions? Do we really, it's related to the previous question, but do we need to rethink the codes, because these events are not happening every 100 years and they're expected to be more often. So do we need to revisit those codes and perhaps expand it? In other parts of the world, the codes are for 1,000 years flood plans. So we live in an area very vulnerable.
So let's take a look at how we got to where we're at with floodplains. The first floodplain maps for Harris County were put out in the early 1980s. A lot of this city and county developed before the 1980s. And unfortunately, a lot of that development happened in areas that it probably shouldn't have. That is now in floodplain, that we did not know at the time that it was floodplain. Floodplains were reviewed after Tropical Storm Allison. And so before Tropical Storm Allison in 2001, to develop a floodplain, you had to go out there with the surveyor and you had to shoot levels across the channel and get a cross section, right, to get the elevation. But technology has improved, so now we fly aircraft that collect ground elevations called LIDAR. And so we can map the floodplains across the ground. So we probably have some of the most accurate floodplains we've ever had. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of building when we did not know where the floodplains were.
Exactly.
In Harris County, we have some of the most accurate floodplains in the entire nation. There's other counties, Austin County, Colorado County, that have not reviewed floodplains in 50 years because there's not the funding to review it. Which kind of gets into what we were talking about earlier, is flooding is very important in Harris County. It's our problem, it's our natural disaster. But you can go 2 or 3 counties away, and flooding is not that natural disaster. But the discussion about floodplains is they're likely the most accurate we've ever seen. I don't know what's going to come along next to make them more accurate. Really, we're to the point now where we're trying to shrink the floodplains with projects, and we call those flood damage reduction. And I key on the word reduction because we will never eliminate flooding. We can reduce it, we can reduce the risk, but we will never eliminate it. And so when we start doing these projects, the Flood Control District and other agencies that do these projects, what we're trying to do is we're trying to pull that water in these floodplains back in towards our channels. So it removes homes from those floodplains. So hopefully they do not flood. But what a lot of people take that as, you've done a project, I'm never going to flood again. And that's not true. That is not true. As we saw with Harvey, there can be the storm that comes along and virtually will exceed everything you have designed. And even if we had all of the projects we wanted in place, Harvey probably would have exceeded most of the design still.
Thank you. Let me comment. We have 5 questions here. We are going to stop for break on time, so we'll see if we can get through them, but we won't be able to honor any more people that stand up to ask questions. Please go ahead.
My name is Gene Fissler, and I lost my voice just now. I recently retired as a Water Resources Director from NRG Power, and I have a question, or basically this. The data point, this storm will become a data point. It'll show up on charts for years and years. My understanding, it was driven by the slowness of the storm. It was not a Category 10 or Category 5. It didn't have flood surge. How fair is it to link what happened to Harris County, which was my understanding a result of a cold front, slowing this thing down and pushing it back over us, to climate change to begin with? I'm not arguing for or against. I just wondered, is there a linkage at all that we can say or we might be able to see later?
So one of the things when we start talking about climate change is it's very difficult to link a single event to climate change. It's very difficult to link what has happened to Harris County and Houston over the last 24 months with all the floods to climate change. Just like it would be very difficult to link the 2011 Bastrop fire to climate change. We have to understand that we are dealing with a very short period of record here. Where in virtually in this area, we have 150 years of record. Yeah, you can go back and look at tree rings and core samples and all that, but the hard data in our period of record is very short. And so drawing conclusions from those periods of record, while you can certainly do that, and be careful, be very careful with the statistics you look at, because statistics can be manipulated by showing a half of a graph or a quarter of a graph. It's very difficult to draw individual events to climate change, and there is nothing, and I will not sit here and say that this has never happened before. It's never happened in our lifetime. But if we go back 500 years, we might have had a storm that dropped 65 inches of rain in 4 days here. It's certainly possible. And that's why I always go back to, regardless of what you design to, there's always that potential that it will be exceeded.
Yeah. And let me make a comment, because I'm seeing the consistency of the theme of some of these questions. This workshop is really looking at how to respond to extreme events and be resilient, and we really didn't bring experts on board to talk about these greater overarching questions. And so I just remind that, and some you're beyond you're not going to get your question asked. Okay, go ahead here. Thank you.
My question's directed for Jeff. I work in engineering. I forgot to tell my name, Kate Halloway at BGE. And after Allison, they redid a lot of the 100-year, 500-year rainfall events. And essentially, that brings a higher standard of design and engineering. Based on this storm event, do you see us as a region recalibrating all of those storm events and recalibrating maybe the floodplain even, now that we have seen this kind of event, and maybe seeing maybe this wasn't a 500 year, this is now the 100 year?
Good question. Before Tropical Storm Allison, we were using NOAA paper TP, I believe it was TP40, which was the standard for the entire nation. This was back in the 60s, this was developed, which gives those recurrence interval periods. After Tropical Storm Allison, the Flood Control District, the USGS, United States Geological Survey, and a couple other agencies reviewed the return frequency rainfall periods for Harris County. With FEMA, then those return frequencies were updated to develop those new floodplain maps in addition to the LIDAR. So that was redone in 2001 for Harris County, and so we got those, what we call the new rainfall tables, if you will. What's happening, and this has been a nationwide effort, is NOAA Atlas 14 is under construction. Texas somehow is the last state to get it, but it is being done. It is supposed to be finished in early 2018. We are working with the Corps of Engineers, who are one of the lead agencies with us, and FEMA. And we talked to them actually last week, and we said we want to make sure Harvey data gets into NOAA Atlas 14 to see if it does affect those frequencies. We don't know what the result's going to be from that. We don't know if it's going to increase the 1% or 100-year rainfall in Harris County by an inch or two. We don't know. But everything we've been through, including the droughts and the floods, will be going into that. So we'll have a good picture. And then once we have that data, then the question becomes, you know, do you remap the floodplains? Is that something you do at that point? And that's probably something we're looking at 2018, 2019.
Thank you.
Hi, Peter Berland, Stebwell Water Consulting. This is a two-part but related question. Mr. Dunn, does the City of Houston have the financial wherewithal to respond and repair what is needed to be repaired right now? And then Representative Wu, you know, there's a saying, don't waste a disaster. When the drought happened, SWIFT got a big push politically, but you also said that different states have different needs, and this is Houston's need, perhaps. So I just wanted to ask Representative Wu, to what degree is there political capital to really get funding to Houston and others affected?
The answer to the question is yes. We are, I mean, you have to do more with less. You have to do better. You've seen some of the pictures where the stuff is up high. The old technology, a lot of our stuff is underwater anyhow. It's concrete and brick. So anything new we put in, here's an idea, waterproof it. It doesn't hurt it. You push the big red button when you leave, you push the green button when you come back. Everything's okay. We've been doing that on a lot of our facilities. We'll continue to do that. We see a lot of the new technology. We really pay attention to it. And we don't get real fancy. We just, you know, make it work, make it simple, do your job. On the other part is the city is insured. There's FEMA. We have crews that have been out right after that, have pictures, and on some of those things that did get damaged, we will harden them. FEMA has another form to harden. So we're just going to do more with less and do better and do better.
I'll just answer as quickly as I can. I think there's a lot of political capital right now, but my fear as always is that there will be another disaster that follows this, and then, you know, most of the people in the legislature, we have a relatively short memory or attention span. And, you know, that's the one reason that I've sort of been like out publicly just sort of beating up on the governor, saying like, hey, call the special session, while everyone is paying attention so we can get some money for this. I don't know if City of Houston's going to be okay, but I know sure as hell HISD is not going to be okay, because their damage right now, their damage is estimated to be in the range of $700 million. You know, out of the even between 80 and 190 billion dollars, that may not seem a lot, but for a school district that's already kicking out 150 billion dollars and already laying off teachers, I don't know where 700 million dollars is going to come from, other than the state.
Thank you.
Hi, Lauren Stadler. I'm an assistant professor here in civil environmental engineering. So I have a question for Mr. Dunn, and you touched upon it in your last answer, but I was hoping you could talk about some of the longer-term damages that these wastewater treatment plants may have incurred from the storm, but then also make some specific recommendations for how these treatment plants might be upgraded in the future to make them more resilient to these extreme events.
So, who's correct that I mean, do we have the wherewithal now to get back and keep functioning is what our question. It is a funding issue for all of us, we know. Everybody, we don't want to raise rates. I mean, I don't want to pay a higher bill. Everybody can raise their hand if they want to. But yeah, we have to get better. We were looking at consolidation. 40 plants is a lot of plants. So we are really looking at a better way to do it. We have tunnels, we have infrastructure. We try to get away from the mechanical problems. There's a lot of new technology we're looking at. We know where the plants that flood are now, I'll tell you that. So we are really, and we know where the level is, so we're going to build it a little bit higher than that. And just build stronger and make sure that we spend the money wisely and look for the future. We have 20-year plans. A lot of those are the consolidation. We have a planning department. Not only that, we work with the water management folks and stormwater and everything. And we try to rebuild Houston. All the departments are working together so we don't waste anybody's money. So I think overall we're looking at that. We really look for the future. I can see 20 years out. Some of our planners can see 50. So yeah, we're working on it.
So since my question is related, I was saving it to last, but one of the things I was experiencing during the hurricane was that I did not have to boil my water. And as an engineer, I understood that that meant we weren't getting the pressure drops that you normally get. So I was asking, is that circumstances of the particular storm, or is that something that we had been preparing for and were reaping the rewards of?
We have. Our counterpart, I'm also do water, not for the city of Houston, but no, and I know there's a huge expansion, one of the largest water projects in the world. They're going to build the Northeast Water Treatment Plant. That's under design right now. I've heard that they're going to redesign and raise it up also. It was flooded, but they've hardened. Folks were just as bad as we were there, keeping it running. You know, the thing people like to hear, water's pretty, we're not. So, you know, they get a little more fair share. But the water system is very well here. The pressure stayed the same, they're monitoring it all the time. There is a lot of planning going through something like this in a utility. I've been here 3 years, I'm from Florida. So I've been through 16 hurricanes. I'm starting to think it's me. But we really did well. You know, I have friends calling and just going, how did you guys do it? How did you do it? And it's a support from the community. It's a support from our political leaders and the hard work by the crews.
So in talking about the afternoon workshops, we'll be taking these conversations into how can we harden it some more, provide more capability to be able to preserve the water quality during a storm and be able to resist it. So I go to our last question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrew Shaw. I work for Black & Veatch. I'm a global practice and technology leader, mostly in wastewater treatment, but also in sustainability. My question's for Jeff. As I kind of look at the statistics on 100-year, 500-year, whatever 100-year flood, it seems like the math is not helping us anymore. Are there alternative ways of looking at resilience and the likelihood of flooding that doesn't use these, like you kind of hint at yourself, we play around with the database to make it more of a 100-year or more of a 500-year, and really, maybe we should be looking at, PMP, like you did a 5-day PMP for certain infrastructure, maybe like reservoirs and dams and that kind of stuff, and our water and wastewater utilities, maybe we should be looking at that rather than these X 100-year floods, which are kind of not meaningless, but they're hard to kind of justify anymore.
Yeah, the utilization of, again, a short period of record and trying to extrapolate out the future of this event was X event is, the understanding of the 100-year and 500-year, both rainfall that falls out of the sky and water level that you get above the ground, by most people is not very good. And, like I said, the 100-year is a 1% chance each year that you're going to get either that amount of rain at your house. So we struggle with this, that Memorial Day 15 on Brays Bayou, a certain segment of the population got that 1% rainfall at their house. But if you lived in downtown, you did not get a 100-year flood. But what do we say? Everybody got the 100-year event, right? Because that's what it comes down to. And so in the end, what we're all saying is we've had 3 very large 100-plus year events, when actuality, Harvey was really the only one that was countywide 1% exceedance. Tax day was not. That was Cypress, Waller County. If you lived over in Crosby, you barely got any rain. Memorial Day 15 was Sugar Land up to about the Meyerland area. And so some of that is our own self categorizing the entire area into an event that in your direct location, it wasn't as bad as you're making it out to be in those areas that were devastated. So that's one of the problems with that. Most individuals do not understand what it means by the 100-year. They think it's once every 100 years. That's something we have faced for a long time. And there was an idea a couple years ago, and I believe it was between Memorial 15 and Tax Day 16, to get away from these percentages. And again, these are FEMA. This is how FEMA categorizes things. To get away from the percentages and go to a category-based, your flood risk is low, moderate, high, extreme. And so if you're in that 10-year level, which is a frequent flood potential, that's an extreme risk. You would be categorized as extreme. But the other thing to keep in mind is just because you're not in a regulatory floodplain does not mean you can't flood. And we saw that with Harvey, and we've seen that with a lot of other storms, is that a lot of our flooding happens outside of our floodplains because of that ponding and sheet flow that we have here. And it's because we're flat, and it's because we get these really incredible rainfall rates. I mean, there's just no system that's going to be able to take 15 inches of rain in 3 hours. It's not there. And when you get that, the water just flows across the ground and floods whatever. And that's even more difficult to add any type of regulatory categorization to. Because pretty much, I boil it down to, and I've told people this for a long time, in Harris County, we're all in a floodplain. We're all in a floodplain in Harris County. And every single person should have flood insurance. Because when that day comes, and for a lot of people, that day just happened with Harvey. But when that day comes, when you get 25 inches of rain over your subdivision, over your house, the chances are the drainage systems are not going to be able to keep up with, and you're going to flood.
I had a quick follow-on question. Do we have a swim or other kind of flood model for the Harris County? I'm new to the area, so I don't know. Do we have kind of flood models that we can kind of look at?
Oh, there's lots of hydrologic models that are used. Of course, they have to be calibrated to match with the FEMA floodplains. And so that gives you elevations and cross sections down all the channels that are studied. And there are some channels in Harris County that are not studied from the Tropical Storm Allison Recovery Project, but the majority of our channels are studied and have that data available to them. One thing the Flood Control District has been looking at is a real-time flood forecasting system. And what that is, right now, an event like Harvey so quickly overwhelms. Most of our events very quickly overwhelm us. If you look at the radar, or if you look at the rainfall statistics, a lot of the rain falls in a very short window of time. We're talking 3, 6, 12 hours. Harvey was the exception. It kept raining. But if you look back at Memorial Day 15, almost all the rain fell in 3 hours. It was 10 inches in 3 hours, and it was over and done. And that very quickly overwhelms staffing ability, and so you have to have the computing on the back end looking through all of this data of how high you think the water is going to get. Because when we're in that type of situation, it's life safety. It is life safety. And that's where we were with Harvey on that Sunday morning. It was life safety. At this point, we are doing everything in our power to save lives and get that information out there. You need to get up. I've never told people to get on their roofs before until that Sunday morning. And that is how quickly these events come on. And so, you know, the good news is technology is now available to us to be able to do a lot of this stuff. 5-10 years ago, we didn't have it. This is the first time social media was used for a big event. And you know what my problem was? Trying to type on this phone as fast as I could. It was a pain. That's one of my lessons learned.
Bigger phone?
And thank you for bringing it back around to how do we respond to these extreme events. This is the end of the descriptive part of the program, this panel on defining the challenge. The next panel is going to be talking more about the technology and preparing for the more detailed workshops in the afternoon to start talking about what's available and what can be applied to this kind of a problem. And so with that, I would like to thank the panelists for their patience and their And we now go into break. There's coffee out in the entryway, and